The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. My name is Carrie Simpson, and I'm with CSIR. Today, I'm being joined by Ian Richardson, and he's going to discuss cybersecurity essentials for business owners. Just going to give everybody a moment to get settled in. I see there's a couple of people still coming into the room. Welcome. It's nice to have you here today. Just to give you a little overview of what we're going to talk about today, this webinar is best suited to business owners and business leaders who are interested in exploring different cybersecurity options for their small businesses. Normally, companies between 20 and 200 employees will find the most benefit from our content today. If you have to leave halfway through, don't even worry about it. This recording will be available on demand on the website after the presentation. Today, we're going to talk about a lot of things, so don't feel overwhelmed. But initially, I'm going to share a little bit of housekeeping with you. You're going to meet your presenters, and then we're going to talk about 10 different cybersecurity essentials that business owners should be concerned about today. I'm going to leave about 15 minutes of Q&A opportunity at the end of the webinar, so I invite you to hold your questions until the end, and we'll try to get to as many of them as possible. Everybody's on mute today, and that's just for ease of presentation. I would ask that you type your questions as you think of them into the box on the right-hand panel. I will read them out to Mr. Richardson at the end of the presentation. And again, we'll try to get to as many of them as possible, and you will be able to watch this on demand for reference after. Again, my name is Carrie Simpson, and I'm the founder of CSIR, and our mission is to cut the bullshit out of IT purchasing. I'm joined today by Ian Richardson, who is the CEO of Doberman Technologies. Ian, thanks for being with us today. Can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, please?
Hey, Carrie, happy to be here. As Carrie mentioned, I'm the CEO of Doberman, and I've been in IT for about 15 years now. And a big passion point of mine is helping small business figure out what's an effective way to tackle cybersecurity. So I'm really happy to be here and being able to share some of that knowledge with the community in general.
We're really happy to have you. Thanks for joining. Right, so as Ian mentioned, today we're talking about cybersecurity essentials. And one of the things that I was most curious to learn about when I asked Ian to participate in this webinar was what were the must-have or highest priority solutions that a business owner would need to consider prior to making an investment in cybersecurity. And Ian informed me that you couldn't make one investment in cybersecurity, that you needed to make an investment in multiple solutions. And Ian, can you share a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, so cybersecurity is a multi-layered approach. There's not a silver bullet or single answer to the threats out in the world these days. When you think about a disaster happens not when one thing goes wrong, a disaster happens when 10 things go wrong. In general, a cybersecurity incident is considered as a disaster, and the same thing applies. So it's not that you didn't have this piece of software, or you didn't have a process, or your backup failed. It's that all three of those things happened, along with 7 other things, to create a true blue disaster that takes your business down. So with each piece or each risk, generally there is a strategy or a solution or a product you can implement, and you want to layer those products so that even if 4 or 5 of them fail, all the hacker is seeing is just another brick wall they have to scale.
All right, well, let's get started then. So the first thing we're going to talk about today are maintenance plans. Ian, what is a cybersecurity maintenance plan?
So a maintenance plan is the concept of having every system or software that your business uses documented and making sure that it's kept up to date with patches. And I just used a word there. So a patch, all that is a piece of software released by whoever built the system or application you're using to make it more stable, fix a bug, or most importantly in this conversation, remove a security hole. So you can update your software, you can update your system to make it more secure. And it's important because if you have that piece of software that has an exploitable vulnerability, that security hole I mentioned, someone can use that to gain access to your systems. So if your thermostat on the wall has a security hole and it's connected to your network, I can get into your network through your thermostat and exploit your data. So imagine that your printer or your thermostat or Word was the reason you end up as the 5 o'clock headline on your local news. That's what we're trying to avoid here. So you create a plan of, here's all my systems, here's my 10 things I care about, here's when I get them updated, here's when the manufacturer releases those updates, and you follow your plan. Big adage in my business, and I found that works for security, is if you plan the work and work the plan will work.
So if I buy my software directly from Microsoft, for example, are they not maintaining my subscription? Are they not providing patches?
Well, so some of it they are and some of it they're not. So let's take Office 365, for example. Office 365 has two parts. There's the part of the application on the internet, the Office 365 webpage, but then you might have Word or Excel or PowerPoint installed in your computer. The web page is maintained by Microsoft. Your computer is maintained by you or your IT professional. So if you're not installing those routine patches for Office and for Windows and for whatever else you have on your computer could be vulnerable to an attack.
And how would I know if my IT solution provider was providing maintenance on a regular basis? Do I just ask them?
You should ask them. So I'm a fan of trust but verify. If you have a trusted relationship with your IT provider, you shouldn't question every single thing they say, but it's fine to ask for validation. Any qualified IT department or provider should be able to provide reporting data that shows all of your IT assets and what versions or patches are installed on them. And then that provider should be able to explain if there are any missing patches, why. Sometimes you don't install a patch. It's very common for those patches on the first release to have a problem or a different bug. So I fixed this hole over here, and now I opened one over here. So it's trading one problem for another. And because of that, an IT provider will sometimes hold back that patch until it becomes a bit more stable. Really what you need to do is have a conversation. So sit down and ask about how your system's being patched, what pieces are patched, what pieces aren't, and get a discussion going so that you're educated.
All right, so there you go. Trust but verify. So tell me about password management. What is password management, Ian?
So password management is a piece of software you use to make sure that every system, every application, everything in your organization has a different password. A really common item, if you go to 10 people, I would wager that at least 5 would say, yeah, I use a similar password for most, if not all, of the systems I interact with. So my password for my email is the same as my password for my computer, is the same as the password for my bank, is the same as the password for my major suppliers. It's the same as the password for my account that I use for Amazon.
Wait, is that bad?
That is that if one of those systems has an issue, all of those systems have an issue. And a password manager makes it easy to ensure that all of those systems I just mentioned have their own unique, random gobbledygook password. So you remember the password, or ideally a passphrase for your password manager, it remembers everything else for you. So the reason why, the key reason why this is so important is you can't control what you can't control. So Amazon, for example, is a big company. They have their own security policies, practices, software, solutions, etc. You have no ability to impact what they do. If Amazon gets hacked and you have an Amazon account, and that Amazon account is your email plus your normal password, and you use your email plus your normal password for your bank account, because Amazon got hacked, suddenly your bank account gets drained at 5 o'clock on Tuesday. The reason this can happen is a determined actor, a hacker, can use a piece of software to try your email, which is the common denominator. Normally accounts are our email addresses. They can use your email plus that Amazon password against the 100 most commonly used websites within an hour. And they can use common variations, so changing 1 or 2 digits at the front, or maybe making it uppercase, lowercase, adding a symbol at the end. They can try all those weird, random, minor changes you use to keep generally the same password, but it's a little bit different. They can get all of that tested within 24 hours without triggering a single alarm on those websites. That's where the risk comes in, is that by using that same password, you're opening the gate wide open for someone to take advantage of you across all of your life, not just that one system. Not many people care that someone could go on Target and order a bunch of towels as them, but they really care when their 401k and bank accounts suddenly are drained.
All right, well, that paints a pretty horrifying picture. So you're telling us that you could spend 20 years building a business and a hacker could take it from you in 24 hours.
I'm telling you that you could spend 20 years building a business and a hacker could take it from you in an hour.
So stop writing my passwords down on a piece of paper and keeping them in a drawer is what I'm hearing. I'm just kidding. I don't do that.
Well, I could check this drawer here, but
all right, so it sounds like there are multiple options so far that business owners should use to protect their business. Talk to me a little bit about security training. Is that for a business owner, for the team, for who should be trained?
Yes, it's for everyone. So a security training platform is something that you put everyone in the organization through, including business owners and those wily sales reps or revenue producers who don't have any time for anything else except to make the company money. So I talked about platform there. You really want to think about 3 pieces when it comes to a security training program. You want the training itself, so something that's easy to consume, whether that's printed material or email delivered or videos on demand, something simple and easy that everyone can consume at their own pace, on their own time, wherever they're at. You want to make sure that you then have some practical testing from the training program. So theoretical knowledge is good, but I've found that once I get my hands dirty doing something, it's one thing to know how to build a wall. It's another thing to actually frame it out, hang the drywall, and paint it. So you want to actually test your organization with some fake attacks. So these attacks, if, for example, I fell for one, no damage is done to the organization. It just says, hey, Ian, you fell for our attack. Here's how we tricked you. So try to trick your organization with some fake attacks and then deliver micro trainings for those people who fall for them. Last but not least, you want to have data and reports in a training program. Those data and reports let you make data-driven decisions. So for example, if Bill continually falls for every single thing, he's gone through the training, he's just not getting it, maybe we can do a one-on-one session with him. Maybe we can sit down and seek to understand why Bill continues to open every attachment on every single email. And it might be because Bill's just doesn't care, but more likely it's because he says, well, hey, when attachments come through from our clients, if I don't process them within 24 hours, we can lose revenue, and I just don't want to lose the company money. Maybe there's different things we can do around Bill's job to lower that stress point that makes him feel like he has to open everything, even though he knows there's a risk. So training, testing, and reporting are the 3 key pieces. The whole goal of the platform is to give people a safe way to fail so we can learn through mistakes. It's important because over 8 out of 10 attacks occur because of human error. So above 80% of the time when a successful attack happens on an organization, it's because someone did something they shouldn't have. And the easiest way to fix that problem is to just educate people on what they should do and what they shouldn't do.
And business owners aren't immune to falling prey to those security attacks. I personally got tricked by my IT company recently with a Starbucks Frappuccino offer. So thanks for that. It was a great way to remember that it's not only my team that needs to be trained on a regular basis. We're all vulnerable to different things in different moments. Now, Ian, is this something that I would ask my IT provider for, or is it something that I go and purchase independently of my IT provider?
Either or. So you can certainly implement your own training platform, or you could partner with your IT professional to implement one. The big thing is to make sure that you have a champion that recognizes that safe to fail aspect. There's a lot of times when I'm involved going in with an organization, you'll find one person in the room who says, well, Bob keeps failing, we got to go shame Bob. We don't need to shame Bob. The whole point of the platform is to allow us to make that mistake with zero repercussions. Because in general, when someone makes a mistake, you touch the hot stove and you burn your finger, it's not a crisis, right? Like the house hasn't burned down, there's, you're not in the hospital, you just burn the tip of your finger and you learn not to touch a hot stove. Think of this as a hot stove exercise for your company. It allows just a little bit of I clicked on something, I got the shame email, I had to do the micro training, but there's no damage to the organization from that. You thought you were getting a free coffee, instead you got an email from your IT provider saying, Carrie, we shouldn't have done that. But at least you didn't have a hacker get into your organization and steal your data or take your money or do some other sort of significant brand damage to the company.
I still want my free Frappuccino.
I would talk to your IT provider and tell them they owe you one.
So let's talk about backup planning. Can you describe, that means a lot of things to a lot of people. What specifically are we talking about today?
So backup planning is a plan around what gets backed up, where does it get backed up, how often does it get backed up, for how long does it get backed up, and what's the frequency of testing of that backup. So I just listed a whole bunch of stuff there. Another piece of it is a lot of people will think about backup and they might back up every single thing every 15 minutes on site, off site, and it's retained for 2 years and everything's gravy, and then they never test it. And if you have a backup that you haven't tested and you're not certain that it works, you have a false sense of security. So backup planning is creating a plan around all of those items. What's important in my world, and how often does it get tested? I like to pair this with a third item, which is what do you recover first? So we talked about a disaster being more than one thing. It's when 10 things go wrong. Disasters usually break more than one thing in a business. So it's not just our emails down. It's that our emails are down, our phones are down, our data's gone, our applications don't work, and the internet's kind of acting funny. Well, out of those 5 things, what's most important to business operations? What's second most important? What's third most important? When your IT professional or IT company sends someone out to respond to this disaster, it's probably one person who's in your building trying to help fix you and get you back up and running. That one person can do one thing at a time. And a lot of the times you can bring up one system at a time. And it's much better to have a plan documented before the disaster about, hey, bring up finance first and operations second and payroll third and phones fourth, so that that person on that very, very stressful day, I would wager probably one of the top 10 most stressful days in anyone's life, it's good to have a plan on how we're going to recover and what we're going to recover in what order before it actually happens. This is not something you want to do by the seat of your pants.
Now, is this something that my IT provider will walk me through, or do I come to them with a, hey, here are the things that are important to me, you figure it out?
Well, I can only speak from my own experience, but this is something that when I'm sitting down and consulting about disaster recovery planning with someone and we're doing a risk assessment, we walk through together. So I guide people through the process. But if you haven't had that conversation, it never hurts to start it. So no matter what, do the conversation. Don't wait for someone to bring you this sort of data. You need to protect yourself.
So let's assume I'm working with an IT provider and they say that they're backing up my stuff, how do I verify that? Going back to your trust but verify, how do I ask them out without being confrontational? And what sort of answer am I looking for?
Well, so if I was the customer and you were the IT provider, I would say, hey, Carrie, we've got those 5 servers, right? Yep. And each of them are backed up. Yep. How often are they backed up? Just so that I've got it written down. Oh, well, this one's once a day and these ones every 15 minutes. Oh, cool. Have we ever tested our backup? No, we haven't. Do we have the ability to? It would make me sleep better at night. Yes, we can. What's the cost for that and what do we have to do? Just like that. IT providers in general are going to understand that we don't know what we don't know. No one's going to get offended by us saying, I'd just like to test the backup. It'll help me sleep better at night. I would do that every day for someone. If it's going to help them feel better, sure, let's test your backup.
Okay. We're going to talk about a couple of things now. There are obviously new ways of doing business. I mean, I didn't even have a computer on my desk until I was in my late 20s. So there was a lot of companies that could manage their businesses just using paper, pens, Rolodexes, spreadsheets. We've got a whole new way of doing business now. And with those new ways of doing business comes whole new ways of opening your organization up to attack. So let's start with BYOD environments. Ian, can you tell us a little bit about what that means and how you would go about creating a plan for that environment and protecting that environment?
So this one's pretty straightforward. Bring your own device is BYOD, and I like to call it bring your own risk. So the issue with BYOD is it's my own laptop, my own cell phone, my own tablet, my own whatever. I'm bringing my personal device into your company network and attaching it to your company internet and using your company data. If you don't have control of that device, it is a big, wide open front door that something can come into your network through. My device might have a virus on it already that activates as soon as it detects your network. It might have a keystroke logger that collects my username and password when I'm logging into company email. It might have a remote access tool that allows someone to remote into it, and they remote in and then happen to see, oh, I'm in a medical clinic and there's an EMR up, and what damage can I do from this? It's just an unknown device with an unknown security state. So you really have to make sure you have a plan if you are going to allow people to use personal devices for company interaction, on making sure that access is limited to the bare necessity for that person to do their job, as well as making sure that you protect the company from that device. Instead of viewing it as, oh, this is Carrie, our trusted partner, our trusted employee's device, this is a random off the street who's got a shady look about them. That's how you should treat bring your own devices. Don't trust it at all, because you don't know what someone does in their personal time, and you don't know what their internet hygiene and security hygiene is for their personal life. So you just need to make sure that you limit those risks.
Okay. And I mean, the cloud is a pretty nebulous term for the webinar today. We're talking about security for cloud. Can you define that a little more for us?
I absolutely can. So the cloud is a funny thing. Everyone is excited about the cloud and the marketing's worked. All the cloud is someone else's computer. In this case, usually it's a server, but instead of you having a little metal box that's sitting under a desk or in a network closet, there's a bunch of metal boxes in a bunch of data centers, those rooms with all the blinky lights and the fancy looking security guards around the country. That's what the cloud is. It's you're using Microsoft's computers or Amazon's computers or Google's computers or someone else's to host your stuff. And by stuff, I mean your documents, your applications, your email, whatever it is. That's all the cloud is. And so when you have a computer involved and you have people involved, you have risks. So you can't control those third parties. I know I've mentioned this a couple of times. You don't know what your cloud provider's security practices are. And if their cloud has an incident because they used the same password, or they didn't have antivirus, or they didn't patch something, it can impact your business just as much as if that server was in your building. So you need to treat the clouds you use as part of your organization. You can't get lax on security with them.
And what should I ask my provider if they're talking about, moving us to the cloud? What are the specific, precise questions that I want to ask them to understand where my stuff is going to live?
Well, so a list of questions is going to be long and probably take us way past this hour, but you really want to dive into what the process and procedures used by both your provider and the cloud partner, if they have one, are around data security. So what's backed up, how often, where, when, how frequent, how often is it tested, what are the security practices that they're doing, who has what privileges. You really want to sit down, and I would move this into a different point on the list. If you do a risk assessment for your organization, you do that top to bottom, left to right look at the organization and how are you managing your risks. You almost want to follow the same guideline for cloud vendors. You want to follow the same guideline for any third-party vendor that has critical access to some or all of your data. So it's a multi-step process. It can get fairly complicated. You're going to be going through checklist after checklist after checklist if you're taking it seriously.
Okay. So talk to me about peripheral management.
So peripheral is a funny word. All we're talking about here is everything that's not a computer. So your printers, your tablets, your phones, your TVs, your thermostats. I mentioned thermostat because there's an interesting story. The Target.com breach, that Target breach that happened, I think, back in 2014, happened through thermostats. So what occurred was there was a wireless network in the stores that all of the thermostats connected to, and that network was open. It means that it just let you connect to it. The enterprising hacker had done some research around the heating and cooling company, which installed these smart thermostats to report back to them when there might need to be a filter change or there was a problem with the system, was outside a store, connected to the wireless network, and said, there's no way this is Target. And after doing some digging, they found out, yes, I am in the Target store. They connected through the HVAC, the heating and cooling wireless system. And the problem with the Target stores is that the heating and cooling system was also talking to the payment processing system. And the payment processing system was talking back to Target corporate. So they were able to go from the thermostat to the credit card machine to the corporate website and steal all the data. And that's how the Target breach happened. That was due to peripheral management problems. So just because it makes your life easier doesn't mean it makes your life safer. So you really want to look at all those smart devices you might be putting into your business or your home and figure out, are they secure? What can this device talk to? What am I allowing to happen in my network that I might not be thinking about?
Important questions. All right, so let's talk about vendor risk. I think that's something that people are hesitant to discuss. Nobody wants to think that a company that they're doing business with could be the reason that their business is compromised. How do you prevent that from happening?
So it's a similar conversation to the cloud vendors. You need to list down your vendors. You need to classify them in terms of how important they are, right? So your shredding company is a fairly important vendor, and you want to understand how are they transporting that paper. You might not think that your cleaners are a very big third-party risk, but those cleaners have access to your building when no one else is there and can generally open every single door without an identifier. So they might be just using a key that opens every door in your business, and they're walking in where there might be sensitive paper or documents. So you want to have some conversations with physical vendors that have access to your building. You also want to have conversations with the vendors that power your business. So you might use an application that you use for sales or a health record if you're a physician's office or any other number of items. Those software vendors will generally render support to your business for their software. So if I sold you an application, my technical team might log into your systems every once in a while to help you update it or fix a problem when you have an issue. It's part of the service. Now, if that software vendor isn't using a password manager and uses the same password for administrative logins to their software on all of their accounts, including your business, and that password somehow gets compromised, suddenly your business has a negative impact, a security incident, because of my poor security hygiene. So really this is around having a concentrated amount of questions that you ask around, can you talk to us about how you access our systems? What do you do to protect passwords? What do you do for auditing? What do you do to make sure that if an incident impacts you, that it's not going to impact me? Talk about how they're structuring their business and how they're performing security risk assessments and what are their policies and procedures with regards to you. You don't need to know everything about them, but you do need to know about how they interact with you and how could they be a risk to you so that you can try to take steps to mitigate it.
I want everybody to consider for a moment, all things being equal, when you're choosing a new vendor, how often are you asking them questions about security? As we move forward and more of our business gets done online, I mean, we certainly weren't expecting the amount of Zoom meetings, for example, that we were going to have in 2020. Having a robust security plan is going to be a value proposition that you're going to be able to use in your sales process moving forward. So consider not only how are your vendors keeping you secure, how can you keep your clients secure? How can you ensure that you're not the weakest link in their security chain? And how can you use this as a compelling way to convince someone that you are in fact the right choice for them? As we move forward, we are going to absolutely choose new vendors based on how well they manage our data and our security. And if we're not considering that, we absolutely should be at this time.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Security is one of those things that's going to differentiate people in the marketplace. And if you're not paying attention to it, you're generally going to fall victim to it. It's important to have that plan.
There are definitely two types of companies that we speak to on a regular basis that are interested in talking about security. One of those companies is a technology-dependent company. They absolutely require technology to execute on any billable hours. So that's a company that's reliant on technology to run their business. But what about companies that are reliant on technology to create a strategic advantage? That's something that a lot of companies should be considering right now. How can you use technology to become a leader in your industry? What are your competitors doing, and where are you on that spectrum? Are you a company that's leading? Are you a company that's following? And if a small investment in security could mean a significant ability to increase your billable rates, would that be interesting to you? Start talking to your solution providers about the ways that you can not just use technology to manage your day-to-day business, but how can you use it to get a competitive advantage in your marketplace? Ian, we're going to talk about incident response now.
Yes, so an incident, when you have a incident occur in your organization, that means that this is probably one of the worst days of your business life. Incidents occur when someone has gained access to something they shouldn't have. So that means either someone got into someone's email, someone got into the server, someone got into the cloud, and something happened. Sometimes that means that you might have a security incident because I sent you a fake email that offered you a free Starbucks drink. You clicked on it and you had to fill out a form to get the free gift card. The free gift card never came. Part of that form was your username and password. I now have your username and password. And then what I did was I logged into your email and sent an email to your assistant and said, hey, I need $500 worth of gift cards. I'm in a meeting. Don't call me. Just send them back to go buy them, scratch off the codes, take photos of them, and then email me back the pictures of them so I can get this going. Your person does that, and you're out $500. It's a quick cash grab scam. That's an incident. Another example of an incident is that someone could have gotten your password, and then they logged into the server and they ran a piece of software that took every piece of data on the server and every piece of data on every computer the server could talk to and encrypted it so you couldn't look at it. That's called ransomware. Two different sides of the spectrum. If I had to choose one, I'd rather be out the $500 than all of my data, but usually you don't get the choice. Having an incident response plan is simply having a plan that details out what do we do when something bad happens. So with this, you'll have call trees, you'll have definitions, you'll have documentations of your system, you'll have a flow chart that shows how does communication occur in the organization, media guidelines, your backup strategy, so that strategy of, hey, if everything goes down, what do we bring back first, second, third? And various other types of data and reports that you'll use for recovery. In general, incident response planning involves the organization and IT. So the plan that your IT is going to follow is going to be a little bit different than the plan that your organization follows. But if you have that plan, it can make that incident far easier to tolerate. In general, an incident takes 2 to 4 weeks to fully recover from, and this is more on the ransomware side, right? That something got in and stole all of our data. You might have to involve police, you might have to involve insurance, you might have to involve your lawyers. All of those people slow down the process, and you have to rebuild your environment afterwards. When a virus gets on a machine, generally you're either restoring from backup or you're completely wiping that machine and setting it up from scratch, depending on if you had the backup or not. So it takes time to do that in an organization. If you have 5 computers, it's obviously a little bit quicker. If you have 100 machines and all of them are impacted by this incident, you're in for a long haul. During that incident, you might have slim to zero ability to generate revenue. You might have no ability to service your clients, to reach out to new customers, to process new orders or business. So you want to make sure that you have a plan around that so that if the worst happens, you know what to expect and how to accommodate it.
So a lot to consider. One of the things I think it's important to talk about is one, they say there's 2 types of businesses, those that have been breached and those who don't know they've been breached.
Yes.
How accurate is that?
I would say that statement is fairly accurate. People who know they've been hacked and people who don't know they've been hacked yet. Everyone who is watching this webinar has been breached in some way, shape, or form. There's too big of incidents that affect too many people out there online. Equifax is a really good one. Equifax is one of those 3 credit union ratings in America, the large unions that give us credit and make sure that we can apply for credit cards or get a mortgage or get an auto loan, etc. Banks and credit card processors use that to extend credit. Equifax had a breach that impacted about half of all working age Americans in the country. So right there, you got a coin flip whether or not you were impacted by that breach. Between that and all the other major organizations, some, if not all of your data is out there somewhere online. That's a fact of where we're at today. What you need to do is figure out what type of data might be online and how do you protect yourself from it being used maliciously. A big other piece to consider is how much data we volunteer. A lot of people are on social media and people will put their likes, their interests, their spouse, their kids, where they went to school, what activities they're involved in, what type of car they drive, where they live, where they go on vacation. Every bit of information is on there. And a lot of the times that information is public facing. And so with a simple bit of research, I could look into someone, find out what they like, craft a fake social profile that fits all of those needs, checks all those boxes to where they would interact with me, gain more intelligence about them, and launch a targeted attack against that individual or someone in that individual's life that would then let me compromise their email or their bank or their business. So it's things to think about when it comes down to how are we interacting online? How can we plan to mitigate the risks on that? That's what comes into incident response.
So the big question, and I think something that all companies need to consider when they're making a choice, is there an IT company out there that can 100% guarantee that I am never going to be breached?
I would say that anyone who offers that guarantee is being a little disingenuous. There is no silver bullet, and there's no multi-layered plan that can eliminate all of the risks.
So you're saying I could technically hire an IT provider, invest a significant amount in security, and I could still end up with my business compromised.
You could do everything right. You could check all the boxes. You could be doing all of your due diligence, and a simple human error could cause a problem. A common technique with banks. So when banks hire what's called a penetration tester, this is someone they bring in to test their security to see if there's a hole that could be exploited. When that penetration tester comes in, one of the most common things they do is they will put a flash drive in the parking lot or the lobby of the bank. It'll say confidential financial data on the flash drive. Invariably, some teller or some banker picks it up, plugs it into their computer, and that's the ballgame. And so just by a simple human error of someone plugging in a device that was not trusted, the BYOD risk, bring your own risk, that's what caused the issue. And you might have done everything else right, but that one person just kind of tuned out, or, yeah, I know I shouldn't plug in a device, and they took that training last year, and we haven't retrained them, or something happened that allowed that device to get into the network and create a risk. Another one of my favorite anecdotes is there was a financial institution that invested majorly into security. They had a second floor raised data center with armed guards and lasers and cameras and biometrics and all this fancy movie system stuff protecting their servers. And the penetration tester drove a forklift underneath the data center, used a concrete saw, cut a little circle around the rack, lowered it down onto the forklift, and drove it out of the building. That was the way they penetrated the security. They just bypassed it. So you have to think about, what am I not thinking about? A lot of the times we find ourselves in that nice little box and we're unable to get out of our own way. So having someone else come in and examine it, getting a second set of eyes, getting an independent auditor is always a good idea, as long as we're viewing it through the lens of, let's find issues and solve them. So looking at risk, doing that risk assessment is never around blame. It's around solving problems. So as long as everyone's approaching it collaboratively versus pointing fingers, you're doing the right action at that point.
So I have an IT company that supports me, and I just want to know, I want to have a second set of eyes, take a look at it. I want to make sure that I'm getting what I'm paying for. I want to make sure that they're doing everything that they say they are. Is that a service that I could rely on another IT company to provide, or is that something that's going to create animosity between myself and my service provider?
So it depends on which way you're approaching it. Some of the things you mentioned might create animosity. So if you're wanting to make sure they're doing everything they said they are, am I getting my value, etc., usually those are displacement tactics. If someone came to me and said, hey, Ian, would you take a look at our network? I'm not sure these guys are doing their job. That says to me that there's a wedge opportunity, and I could come in there and potentially displace that provider. If instead we're saying, hey, we want to make sure that we have a viewing of all our risks and that we can mitigate them with our partner, even if I find a risk that that partner maybe should have caught, sometimes we're busy fighting the fires of today instead of focusing on the risk of tomorrow, right? If you're a big company and you've got a lot of different complicated systems and a lot of issues that occur, this one little nagging security hole that, hey, you know, we found that 3 months ago and we said, okay, we got to make sure we come up with a plan to fix that. And then we've just had fire after fire after fire after fire. In order coming in and finding that doesn't mean that we need to shut everything down. At least we know about it. Now we can fix it. So it depends on really the attitude of the organization. If you're initiating the audit because you feel like you're not getting what you paid for, in general, you will get feedback that reinforces that viewpoint. If you're initiating the audit saying, I just want to make sure that we're safe and I want to be part of the solution, then in general, you'll get information that will reinforce that viewpoint. So it depends on how you walk into the engagement, what you're going to take from it.
I think a lot of business owners forget that quite often the biggest risk to their security is them. I mean, I know, for example, our IT company would suggest buying new equipment, perhaps, and I don't want to make that spend, right? Like, we just bought new computers 3 years ago. What do we need new ones for now, right? My IT company is telling me I need to buy new stuff. I'm pushing back and saying, no, I don't want to buy that stuff yet. And then we're breached. I mean, that's my problem. And I think a lot of the times we're not sharing risk and we're not sharing blame with the companies that are supporting us. And there are, obviously opportunities for better communication and improvement in all of our vendor relationships. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You could have somebody come in, take a look at your network and maintain the relationship that you have with your current solution provider, or you could shop around. You've got multiple choices. Ian, we've got some questions now. So I'd like to start with the Q&A period, if that's all right with you.
Absolutely, bring them on.
Yeah, I definitely learned a lot today, and I have a couple of questions as well. So the first question is, what password manager do you recommend? And one of the things that we strive to do here at CSIR is be completely vendor neutral. So we're not going to encourage Ian to tell us what password manager we're going to buy. There's lots of opportunities for you to do some research out there. There's different webinars on our site that you can take a look at that will show you the differences between password managers. And if you're looking for, a quote on a security solution, of course, Ian can provide one and his contact information will be available, but I've asked him to be completely vendor neutral. So we're not dodging your question. We just asked him deliberately to not pitch his business and not pitch the vendors that he works with either. So thank you for the question. I'm sorry we can't answer that one. The next question was, if I had to choose to focus on one of these things first, one of the 10 that you've mentioned, which one should I choose?
So that is a loaded question. Referring back to what I mentioned at the top, security is a multi-layered approach. If you're thinking about this from the lens of how can I eat this elephant, the one bite at a time aspect, I would say that doing a risk assessment for your organization is a good starting place for anyone before they make any structured spend. So looking at your organization, figuring out where your risks are at, classifying those risks. Risk is defined as impact plus probability. So how important is it to me? What does it do to my business if this risk is exploited? And how likely is it that this risk will be exploited? The higher the risk, the higher the impact, the higher the probability equals the higher the risk. Likewise, you could have an extremely impactful risk that is almost impossible to be exploited. That's something that we can probably put to the side today. And you might have something that's very likely to be exploited, but it's it's not going to cause any financial damage at all. It's actually negligible in terms of impact. Well, that's something we could ignore too. Focus on your red or critical risks first and come up with a plan to mitigate them. That being said, some of these items, like a maintenance plan, isn't necessarily going to be called out on a risk assessment. You might find that certain systems aren't patched. And the mitigation that someone might say is, hey, go patch those systems. Well, if you only patch them once, and then stop patching them, that risk starts to build again, right? So you really need to keep these strategies in mind as you go through the risk assessment. And I would challenge you to find a way to do all of them. You can't ignore one in favor of another, or else you're leaving yourself open to attack.
So this is my question. If a company wanted to do a risk assessment, can you give them a ballpark? What should they expect to spend on a risk assessment, and how long should it take? So if I wanted to buy one today, I wanted to have you or another provider come in and provide a security assessment, what should I budget for it, and how long until I can expect the results from it?
So I'm going to use the answer that my lawyer uses with me every single time I ask even the most simplest of questions and say, it depends. It really does, though. So if you are a business with 10 people and one organization, obviously your risk assessment would be a far less amount of time and treasure versus someone who has 150 staff and 10 locations, including a 24/7, 365 clinic. So it really does depend. In general, I would see a range of mid to high 4 figures, sometimes up into 5 for the small business. So hopefully that gives you a general range, but $3,000 to $10,000 is usually a range. 3 on the low, less complicated side, 10 on the much more complicated side.
All right, so for a small business, around 20 computers with an uncomplicated environment, you guys can buy a security assessment for the price of a new laptop. Something to consider. All right, next question. This is a long question. We might not be able to get it. What do I need to back up daily, weekly, and monthly?
Whew, okay. Well,
it doesn't say anything about what kind of company you.
So. Yeah. What do we need to back up daily, weekly, and monthly? So daily is usually something that you do. So I'll use healthcare as an example. That's part of my background. So in a healthcare practice, usually you have 2 primary systems. You have the EMR, the medical record. That's like the charts. You used to have the doctor with the folder. Now they have the tablet. That's the patient data. And then you have what's called the practice management system. That's the scheduling and the billing and the insurance information. Both of those change every day. So if I'm a single doctor, I might see 20 patients in a day. That's 20 different charts that I just modified. And there's 20 different billing records and schedules and items that I just modified. Those things you need to make sure you're backing up daily, because you wouldn't want to lose if, Carrie, you came into my medical practice and we had an appointment, and then 2 weeks later my system crashed and I was only backing up once a month. Well, I lost all of your visit data. And it would be impossible for me to remember those 20 people times 14 days, every single thing that I did. So that's a daily task, or maybe even an hourly task for a doctor. A weekly task might be more around systems that change infrequently. So backing up a payroll system. If you're paying every week, you need to back up your payroll system every week. But if my payroll system failed on Wednesday and I backed it up on Tuesday, nothing changed between Tuesday and Wednesday. I hadn't run payroll yet. That's maybe a weekly system. A monthly system is much more around archiving in time. So if we think about your network, and there is say you have a spreadsheet or a database, and you change that database fairly frequently, and we find out that there was a part of that database that got corrupted 4 months ago, but everything else is fine. Your IT partner might restore your database from 4 months ago, so you can pull out just that section, just that piece, and copy it over into your working database and continue forward. That's what you would use monthly backups for. It's really around how far back can I go. Sometimes when incidents get really, really, really complicated and people get really, really, really badly impacted, those monthly backups can also save your business, right? So if you had a monthly backup of your business, you might have lost a month's worth of productivity, but that's better than 20 years worth of productivity. Again, that's a situation you hope never happens, but sometimes they can be the Hail Mary pass that keeps the business open.
Great. Okay. Next question. We work with freelancers that use Mac computers. We don't use them. Occasionally they are on site, but most often we share data through Dropbox. Are there any risks to this?
So you mentioned 2 different things. One is when they come on site. So the Mac freelancer, even though they're a trusted contractor partner, still isn't part of your organization, and you can't control what you can't control. So that vendor should never be on your internal network. They shouldn't be able to talk to your printer. They shouldn't be able to talk to your computers. You can give them internet access, but they need to be able to talk to the internet and nothing else. So part of it's when they're in your building, you need to protect them from you, or them from you and you from them. The other piece is that Dropbox sharing. So Dropbox is a pretty big company. They've got security. You would want to have a conversation with Dropbox about what their security measures are and make sure you're comfortable with that. And then just make sure that you have a security software program that can scan that Dropbox. So Dropbox, what it does is it stores files on your PC and it stores files on my PC. So if I had a virus on my PC or on my Mac that got into Dropbox and then synchronizes to your Mac, it could potentially infect your Mac or your PC, right? Because of that synchronization. You want to make sure that you have something that protects you from that. So having that antivirus program, that advanced security software that scans all of those files and makes sure that nothing malicious is coming across is also a key piece of that strategy as well.
Okay, next question. Oh, two-part question. One, can I monitor my employees' personal devices? And two, are there any legal repercussions for people who are doing something that they shouldn't be on their computers or our computers? So we don't give legal advice here at CSIR. We aren't lawyers.
Yeah,
but as far as like, I guess could you monitor a BYOD device?
Can and should are two different words. You can do almost anything with technology. The should is a moral, ethical, and legal question that I would refer to other parties. That's a business owner decision. That's not a technology decision. That's HR and legal there. So I would advise people to consult with an attorney before they do any monitoring of a personal employee device.
Okay, and we've only got a couple minutes, but we've got 5 or 6 more questions, so I'm just going to take a minute and pick through them for a second. Here's a good one. What if we don't currently work with an IT company and we have an incident? What should we do?
So if you don't currently work with an IT company and you don't have an incident response partner, in general, you might be able to search around for those qualified providers in your area. And the call that you would do with, you call their 800 number, call their main office number. You should ask to speak with someone in their sales team and ask them if they do incident response. That's a specific service offering. Not every IT provider will offer it, but some will. You should expect to have to sign a contract. Part of that contract, you should expect to have a fairly robust limitation of liability for the provider because they're walking into an environment they don't support. They don't know anything about you. They don't have any idea about what your backups are or what your security solution is. And they're frankly just not responsible for anything that might happen by engaging them. So expect to have a pretty robust limitation of liability before anyone will talk with you. But at least in major metropolitan areas, there will be IT providers that will do incident or breach response for people, even though they're not a contract customer.
So again, this is my question, not an attendee question, but I've got 20 computers and something happens. What kind of initial upfront expense are we looking at just to have them come in and look around?
Well, so in your environment, I would, if Doberman was providing that incident response, we would collect a $5,000 retainer upfront.
Okay.
So, and in general, if you had an incident that destroyed all 20 of your machines, you might be looking at a $10,000 to $15,000 bill at the end of it. Sometimes that's covered by insurance, sometimes it's not. It's just one of those, it depends, right?
So at least 5, probably 20. Now, conversely, if I'm engaged with an IT provider and there is an incident, will my agreement with my IT provider cover that incident? Is it already paid for, or is this something that I'd have to pay for over and above the services that I'm receiving right now?
Going back to my lawyer answer there, Carrie, it depends. It depends on your agreement. I would check your contract. I'm not going to portray myself as knowing everything about every provider in every city and every state, but my educated wager is that incidents would not be covered under your service agreement, especially if you have rejected certain security measures that your provider has presented you with. You should plan on having a bill.
All right, that's good to know. Well, I really appreciate your time today, Ian. It's been a really informative session. Ian's contact information is right here up on the screen, and you are welcome to contact him directly. You are welcome to email us through the website if you want to get in touch with him or anybody else that's featured on any of our CSIR presentations. I want to thank you for spending some time with us today. And Ian, any parting comments before we go?
Yeah, security is a team effort. So it's really about getting the organization rowing in the same direction. If you're a boater, if you've ever had one person dragging an oar in the water, it slows the whole boat down. So you really want to make sure that everyone is going in that same direction and make sure that you've got an effective internal marketing plan to get everyone on the same page on why security is important. And just get your team engaged. Get engaged early and get engaged often. And thank you, Carrie, for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Ian. So remember, as business owners and business leaders, things come from the top down. If security is important to you, it's important to everybody. So make sure you're leading by example. Thanks, everybody. I hope you have a great afternoon, and I'll see you again tomorrow at CSIR. Take care.
Take care.